I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Omni at the Movies, where today I'm reviewing the latest release from Small Town Monsters, the docudrama film entitled Bloodlines: The Jersey Devil Curse. At long last, Small Town Monsters, which has made its name as one of the best cryptozoology documentary companies out there, has covered the Jersey Devil. And I'm actually quite passionate about the Jersey Devil legend because, well, for one thing, I was born in New Jersey, so when you're born in New Jersey, even if you spend most of your life somewhere else and don't even consider yourself a part of that state anymore, you always feel that sort of kinship. You're like, yeah, I like Bon Jovi because he's a Jersey kid like me. Something like that. But of course, I'm also big on the Jersey Devil because I think it's a fascinating story. So fascinating, in fact, that the next book I publish is going to feature the Jersey Devil. Not necessarily the way you'd expect, but I don't want to give anything away. Let's just say I've been really looking forward to this because I was especially hoping it would give me some more interesting tidbits to add to the book. At the same time, however, the Jersey Devil is kind of considered the black sheep of cryptozoology because, well, it's one of those things that kind of veers into a realm a lot of cryptozoologists aren't comfortable with going into. Cryptozoology, when you get right down to it, ultimately, yes, it's viewed as a pseudoscience, but really it's not doing anything that biology didn't do for centuries beforehand. It's looking for evidence of new kinds of animals, or animals that were thought extinct but may not be. It's That's biology, plain and simple. It's a study of animals. It's just animals that at this point have not been confirmed. In order to be taken seriously, though, a lot of cryptozoologists like to keep the conversation focused on the scientific aspect, saying that these creatures are just animals. Sasquatch is a hominid. The Loch Ness Monster is a sea-dwelling creature of some type, eel or plesiosaur, whatever it might be, but they are ultimately not monsters, they are not magical beings. Even something as bizarre as the Mothman still can be framed in terms that are scientific, just kind of veering into the realm of science fiction. The word extraterrestrial gets bounced around a lot, for example. But when it comes to the Jersey Devil, I mean, if you take the sightings and the different accounts and the origin story as literally as possible, the only way to reconcile everything would be to admit that it is a supernatural being, and therefore not an animal. It's something beyond that, which is something a lot of cryptozoologists just aren't comfortable with. Some might be, but I'd say most of them aren't. So it usually gets relegated to the realm of folklore, though at the same time, that doesn't stop the sightings from happening. So, for as much as I've been looking forward to this documentary, I've also been wondering how would they actually approach this topic? The Jersey Devil, you might say, is the ultimate small town monster. It has a particular region it is native to, and whatever it might be, that's where it remains, and it is a staple of that region. It is perhaps the oldest folk tale in America as far as colonial folk tales go. And heck, there are even Native American traditions that call the Pine Barrens the realm of the dragon. So there's something that might have predated that even. All the same, though, I was curious as to how they would approach it because, for the most part, they've remained fairly open-minded. Not that they, I think, really believe everything as literally as it happens, but they make these films without casting judgment either. They're just letting the eyewitnesses tell their stories, letting the researchers put forward their theories. And yes, when they do the recreations, they do the literal interpretations of this was a Sasquatch, this was a dog man, this was a Mothman, this was a Flatwoods alien. But at the same time, that's just for the recreation because they're recreating what they're being told. That's the thing. So that brings us to Bloodlines. And it's very different from the other documentaries that have come before it. Very, very different. And I'm still processing whether or not that's to its detriment or to its benefit. So for starters, when I began this video, you may have noted I called it a docudrama, because there are lengthy segments throughout the film in which highly fictionalized encounters with the Jersey Devil are recreated, sort of as short films interconnected by the documentary narrative. And it goes backwards. It starts with an encounter in 1989 that's totally made up. Then it does a 1909 encounter to fit in with the 1909 flap of sightings, and then goes back to 1735 to show us the birth of the Jersey Devil. And each of these films has a different style. The 89 setting is kind of reminiscent of Stranger Things, like the opening of Stranger Things. Kid goes off riding his bike through the forest and encounters this creature, sort of thing. The 1909 segment is done like a silent film, and the 1735 version, I mean, technically there was no film back then. Making movies wasn't even considered a concept, but they do that sort of as a black and white 1930s horror movie, possibly pre-code. And as those segments go, I mean, I won't say the acting is stellar, but it's not bad. I think it's weakest in the 80s segment. The silent film segment, I mean, there's no sound, so, well, or at least no audible dialogue. So they can get away with it being a bit more over the top, especially since it's a silent film and that was part of the style. The acting is best in the birth segment. But I will also say that the silent film section cheats considerably because it's not technically a silent film. They add sound effects, including, I kid you not, the classic Rodan roar to represent the Jersey Devil. I am dead serious. It is Rodan's roar. Trust me, you can look around and see I'm a Godzilla fan. I know what Rodan sounds like. It was Rodan's roar, and I have no idea how they got away with it. Watch the documentary now before Toho finds out, I guess. So that felt a little weird, but ultimately these are interesting ways of dramatizing the event. I should also say that the birth sequence felt a little bit small. I mean, they are an independent company, they're working with a limited budget, so they could probably only afford to do this segment with 2 people, Mother Leeds and the midwife. But that still feels really small for the event. Like, the original legend says that all 12 of the Leeds children and the father were also present at the time. So their absence is felt. Either way, though, they are interesting, though they're completely fabricated. And that brings us into the other thing about this documentary that really sets it apart. The fact that, so far, it seems to be the only small town monsters documentary that treats its subject as 100% folklore. One thing that really stood out to me was that this film contrasts quite starkly with the previous film they released, American Werewolves, which is the latest of their Dogman films. I think they've done, what, 3 at this point? There was Bray Road Beast, there was Howl of the Rougarou, and American Werewolves. I don't think I'm missing any of them. But with American Werewolves, you can go and watch that review as well if you're interested. That film was 100% eyewitness driven. It was about the people who have encountered these things, whatever they may be, telling us about their encounters and having them recreated. And there weren't really any interviews with so-called experts. Other documentaries they've made have kind of struck a balance between interviewing people who know the region and know the lore and are actual cryptozoologists and people who have actually seen these things. American Werewolves, however, was completely about the eyewitnesses. But with Jersey Devil, it's completely about the experts. Now, obviously, there are some eyewitnesses that simply cannot be interviewed. I mean, I doubt anyone who might have claimed to see the Jersey Devil in 1909 is still around, so you have to get those accounts second and third hand. But there have been other sightings, recent ones, which leads to the question of why they weren't included. And again, it seems to be because they're viewing this one as total fiction. And as I alluded to at the beginning, that is a kind of typical way people respond to the Jersey Devil. Most people don't take it seriously. They just consider it to be a local legend. But then again, there are still sightings that happen. There are even photos that have been taken, either of the Jersey Devil or something purported to be the Jersey Devil, or of evidence it might have left behind. Surely they must have been able to find someone who had seen it, but they didn't. Maybe it was simply because they couldn't afford to after getting people like the guy who wrote the recent book deconstructing the legend of the Leeds family. But at the same time, it feels weird that they didn't include even one. And was that a good thing or a bad thing? Again, I'm not sure. Like, okay, the literal legend of Mother Leeds giving birth to a baby that either came out looking like a devil or turned into a devil, in all likelihood, not true. The Leeds family was real. They really had 12 children, but the evidence does suggest it was basically just a socio-political hit job, that legend. At the same time, though, like I said, people have encountered this thing. I've seen other documentaries about the Jersey Devil. I know that these encounters have happened. I don't necessarily know what they've encountered, but it feels like something is out there, something that even people who've lived in the region their whole lives still find unfamiliar, except in terms of interpreting it as the Jersey Devil. So, why that aspect wasn't included in this documentary, I don't know. That being said, it does do a pretty good job of looking at the folkloric aspect, the culture of when the different mass sightings took place, and it doesn't skimp on those details. Like the 80s segment, it ties it into the satanic panic that happened at that time. 1909 segment ties it into yellow journalism and the dime museums that were basically like roadside attractions that scammed you out of your money to see something that was purported to be amazing but wasn't. And of course, there's the original legend and what led to that. It definitely goes into detail on those aspects. And those aspects are incorporated into the stylistic recreations, which include an interesting look for the Jersey Devil, which is almost kind of like a wyvern design. I kind of find it very similar to their model for the CGI Mothman they frequently use. I wouldn't be surprised if it had the exact same skeletal rig, and as far as looks go, it looks good. So, anyway, it does a good job incorporating those elements. It's an interesting examination of the culture. It's an interesting examination of how the story has evolved and how the story affects the culture and the people who know about it. And at its core, that's always been what Small Town Monsters has been about when they make these things. I still kind of feel like something's missing, though. But maybe I just feel that way because I'm passionate about the Jersey Devil legend. I don't know. It's still worth a watch, I think. But I guess the jury's still kinda out for me on some aspects. But overall, still not a bad production. And that's about all I have to say about the film. As for what I have to say about the Jersey Devil, well, you'll find out soon enough. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.